All right, let's go ahead and get started. 9:30 in the morning, a great time to rock and roll. Welcome. My name is Dr. Kerna. I'm delighted to have you in this class. This is classic vinyl, rock and roll, but we are going to change the name of this class unofficially because I don't think the title reflects really what we do. When we talk about classic vinyl and rock and roll only, we're kind of being a little ageist. We're kind of excluding the way that most of us experience popular music in this day and age. So for our purposes, you can think of this class as the history of popular music. We're going to go from 1950 on up to 2026 and do a little survey of the different types, the different approaches, the different ways music has been made and consumed. And in particular, you are going to come out of this class with a better understanding of the role that popular music plays in your own life, your sense of your identity, your sense of yourself as a consumer of popular music. So if you're not really a rock and roll person, or quite honestly, if like me, you think of classic vinyl as like for baby boomers, my parents' age, then you're safe because we're actually going to be talking about a whole variety of music. And it includes rhythm and blues, soul, funk, hip hop, rap, all popular music out of the last 50 years. Before we get going, just very quick, could I ask you, sir, to turn off the lights? Let's see if we can get those out up there. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so again, my name is Dr. Kirk Kernut. I'm actually the chair of the English department. I've been teaching at Troy long before you were born. I started in 1993, so I am in my 32nd or 33rd year of teaching here. But I love music, and so we are going to be talking about how we get from Little Richard in the 1950s all the way up to Tyler, the Creator. All right. Let's go over some basic stuff here in terms of how we operate the course. So everything that you need to succeed in the course will be on Canvas. That's where you'll do most of your work. That's where I will grade your assignments, and that's where you will keep track of your grades. So I'd like everybody after class to get into Canvas, to get into the modules. This is how we operate. We go week by week. So we're in week 1, the introduction period, and you'll see that it looks like this. A little picture of Wet Leg there, one of my favorite bands. In module 1, you can find the syllabus, and that'll give you kind of a week by week account of the topics that we're going through in the class, the due dates. We'll have all of that sort of spelled out for you as we go along. But more importantly, you already have the opportunity, the first day of class, to get some extra credit points, 20 extra credit points. All you have to do is click on that link there, and it'll take you to this part up here where it says extra credit number 1, class introduction. So what you're going to do, and part of what you're going to be graded on this semester is your creativity. So I really want you to go all out on this assignment. By next Friday, after ad drop, you are going to upload a picture of your first album cover that you are dropping, either as a rock, country, or hip hop star. Okay? So for example, there's previous semester. There's another previous semester. Obviously, Evelyn Kate was a Taylor Swift fan in another life, right? This semester, I'm going to encourage you to have a lot of fun and really develop your cover using AI, using either Copilot or Google Gemini. All right. And I'll give you links to both of those in the shell. Google Gemini is probably the better one right now. Copilot comes with your Troy account, but Google Gemini you'll be able to use anyway. So what you want to do for your extra credit assignment to get 20 extra points is you're just going to give me an album cover. You might be Addison Rae. You might be Perfume Genius. That's a great album cover, a little weird, right? You might be Lily Allen. We're going to talk about her album later on. The album in which she devotes entire hour to dogging her husband from Stranger Things for cheating on her. I don't know that we want an album cover like Lord. This might not really help me get to know you as well as I would like to in this class, but that's probably the weirdest album cover of 2025, Lord. And it was not a successful album. We'll kind of talk about why. Wet Leg, a little weird, but very distinctive. Or Mac Miller. And again, you can use an illustration if you want to. So I want to see your creativity. Introduce yourself with your creativity. So upload a photo, run it through Google Ag, tweak it, give me something creative, something distinctive, and then in 150 words or so, I want you to introduce yourself. Tell us what type of music that you like. Tell us what role music plays in your everyday life. Some of you might be musicians who create music. Any musicians in here? Anybody? One, two, all right. A few, three, four. Great. You might be just people who listen on your earphones as you work out or have it on as the background music. That's perfectly fine. It just all depends. So we want to know what type of music you like and what role it plays in your everyday life. All right, let's go over some more particulars. The course syllabus, there's a section in Canvas, again, where you can find the course syllabus. It'll be, you can download it there again. You really don't need to download the syllabus, although I do want you to read it and just get a sense from the beginning of class when the due dates are. All right. And that's, we'll be going from today all the way till middle of May. So we have plenty of time to get through a lot of different type of music. Now, this part you may not like, so I made a video to kind of soften this up for you. So this is my attendance policy for this class.
Hey guys, this is our attendance policy for Music 2245. Butts got to be in seats to pass the class. Each class session, you'll take a quiz on that day's material.
No makeups allowed except for an excused absence requested with documentation before class. So the moral is,
so get your cutie patooties to Patterson 107 every Tuesday, Thursday at 9:30 a.m. and you'll do great in this class.
See how much fun AI is? You can make up all kinds of weird stuff. All right. If you want to put Bigfoot on your album cover with you, go ahead. I think that's great. All right. So just to reiterate, the attendance policy, and I want to be very clear about this. There's 51 students in this class. I want to see 51 faces here every day. All right. I fight this battle all the time, but the reality is for you to get a good grade in this class and to get something useful out of it, I need you to be here. So this is how we make you come to class. We take attendance every day with a quiz at the end of class. Very simple. 5 questions, 2 points apiece, so 10 points a quiz. They are questions of the variety like who's buried in Grant's tomb. As long as you come and you pay attention, you'll be able to answer the questions. This is roughly 1/3 of your grade. We usually get to about 26 or 27, 10 points apiece. That's about 270 points out of 1,000. All right, so maybe a little more than 1/4. All right. Now, I do want to tell you that in past semesters, I've had people that quit coming to class. They miss 10, 12, 13, 14 quizzes, and then they wonder when they're doing what they think is A work, why they end up with a C in the class. So again, I want to emphasize, you've got to come to class. You're paying for this experience. I put a lot of work into making this class hopefully fun and interesting and factual. So we've got to be here every day. And I think a lot of universities now are going to start reinforcing attendance. I know 9:30 is pretty early, but if I can make it, you can make it. All right. Excused absences. I know we have some athletes in here. I know there's flu going around, but here's my rule. Excused absences are only allowed when the instructor is contacted beforehand, and you must supply documentation. All right, so if you do get sick, I need you to tell me beforehand. Now, I will tell you that I tape every class and I post it in Canvas. Because again, inevitably we have athletes, we have people do get sick, people do have emergencies that they have to miss class. So you will have an opportunity to retake the quiz or take the quiz outside of class if you miss with an excused absence. But I want to emphasize again that you got to let me know beforehand, okay? In some cases, I have people in May come up and say, I missed 10 quizzes, can I retake them? And unfortunately, the quiz is only available for a couple days after that particular class. So make sure that you're here every Tuesday, Thursday. All right, let's talk a little bit about how we operate in the classroom. I love when y'all ask questions or you want to have input into the things that we talk about. This should be an interactive class. The classroom is not built as well as I would like to be interactive. There's a few things I want to clarify, though, about what it means to be engaged as a student in this material. So again, let's have a little Bigfoot video here to illustrate.
In-class etiquette means no phones allowed except when taking the daily quiz. Headphone and earbuds are off heads and out of ears.
All right. Bigfoot does yoga. Who knew? All right. And then here's a little bit more.
Laptops are only open when taking notes. Instructor reserves the right to sneak up on you and check. Do your homework your own time.
All right. Just to clarify, phones. Phones are a huge issue. Within the next year, year and a half, public schools are already doing this. Universities are going to ban cell phones in the classroom. Cell phones have destroyed our attention span. All right. So no phones out. I don't want to see anybody scrolling on phones. If I do, I'm going to ask you to put them away. The only time we'll have phones out are at the end of the class, the last 5 minutes of class. You can take your quiz on your phone in Canvas or bring your laptop and you can get into Canvas and take it. All right. I also don't want to see headphones on heads or earbuds in ears. A couple times teaching this class, I've had people who accidentally plug their Bluetooth into the classroom speakers. That's not good. All right. So you want to be here. You want to be paying attention. You want to be engaged. You want to be taking notes, because if you're just watching, you're all just going to be passive and blur it out. So get a notebook, take notes. Laptops, you're more than welcome to use your laptops. However, keep in mind that I can see in the reflection of your faces what you're looking at. All right. So, I do reserve the right, if I don't feel like you're actually taking notes, or if you're scrolling, or if you're on another website, or if you're doing homework for another class, I do reserve the right to come up and look at your laptop. I'm not going to do it to you today, but starting next week. So make sure that you can take notes on the laptop. That's fine. But I can tell when you're not listening, and that's what I want. All right. Again, please do your homework for other classes on your own time, not on my time. All right. That's about the meanest I will be for this semester, I promise. Just got to reinforce some rules and make it clear where I come from. All right. Again, I want to emphasize that I want you to participate in the class. You'll get a lot more if you ask questions, or if you give your opinions, or if you give your input. And we'll do that here in just a little second, just a little bit. So again, keep in mind the attendance policy, keep in mind the classroom etiquette. This will be the standard, I think, in most college classes in the next year or so. All right, so let's talk about what we do in this class that you get graded on in terms of assignments. And just so we can have more fun with AI, I made up a little funk song about what we do in this class, generated it through AI.
Come to class, take a quiz, 10 weekends, a writing assignment of 100 words, 2 big projects, a midterm, and a final. The midterm is a fanzine, like we used to make in the 90s. The final is a 5-minute podcast. Just do your work, turn in on time, come assemble, you'll be fine.
What's this one? The chief is the rule, baby.
That's my AI's version of 90s G-Funk. That sucks, by the way, just to clarify. That's not very good. So let's clarify what that is. Again, we talked about the daily writing assignment, 5 short questions, 2 points apiece, 10 points total. Again, I'm not out to embarrass anybody or shame anybody. This is a reward for coming to class. So there'll be very easy questions just to make sure that you've been listening. We will have every so often throughout the semester 10 very short writing assignments, usually assigned on one Thursday and due the next weekend. So you have a whole week to do them. Now, I want to emphasize these are short, 100 words. We're writing very short, concise things, partly because with 50 of you, I don't have the time to grade papers for a class like this. However, that doesn't mean we can't write and learn to write better and to critically interpret the music that we're talking about just by doing paragraphs. So these will be very short assignments designed to bolster your writing skills. I've taught writing for almost 40 years. I've published 25 books in 30 years. So if I am nothing else in my life, I like to think I'm a pretty good parent and grandparent, but if anything else, I know how to write. And I'm going to teach you how to get a leg up on the writing. And part of that means being very specific in terms of writing professionally, the sorts of presentation skills you need. And that's stuff that you can apply to letters of applications and resumes and all kinds of things. So we'll be writing about a lot of different genres of music. You'll be describing specific songs. Some things we're going to work on is how we describe songs. I'm really going to push you to interpret the songs and be creative as possible. So we do 10 of those, 20 points apiece. That's 200 points. Now the big assignments, there's 2 of them. We do a midterm project, probably go up to 6 to 8 pages this time. 4 is a little short. But what we do is we create our own fanzine. A fanzine used to be a homemade magazine before the internet. When I was growing up in the 80s, fanzines were how we communicated with our music cultures before we could be on listservs and in groups online. So fanzine is a fun project where you focus on a particular artist that you enjoy. It can be anybody you want. But you create a fan magazine that you're going to be designing with images and with text. And the fun thing about zines is the whole point of them is that they're homemade. All right. They give you the opportunity to make a homemade magazine. Your final project, this is a podcast. So what you do for this is you'll be given some options. And you'll pick, and again, you pick the song or the artist. I do not dictate in any way what music you write about for this final project. But what you do is you pretend you're a podcaster and you produce a short 5-minute podcast. It may be on music and true crime. It may be on breaking down the components of a song, or it may be about history. But what you do is you write the script, you record it, and you upload it to Spotify or one of the other professional out there platforms. So it's a fun assignment, much more interesting than taking a final exam. Again, the whole point of these assignments is for you to be as creative as you want to be. All right. And that's 300 points total. So again, we have about 1,000 points. Now we will have some extra credit throughout the semester, give you some opportunities to attend some cultural events. So if you don't do as well as you want on some of those, you certainly have a lot of opportunities to make up any points you miss. 1,000 points possible. Any Lana Del Rey fans in the room? All right. 1. Okay, good. I'm a big, okay, 2 or 3, 4, 5. Good. She's got a new album coming out supposedly this spring. Hopefully it's not every single song is about her husband, the alligator man, but we'll hope for it. But here's an AI's version of our course assignments in the style of Lana Del Rey.
Come to class, take a quiz, 10 weekends, a writing assignment of 100 words, 2 big projects, a midterm and a final. we used to make in the 90s. The final is a 5-minute podcast. Just do your work, returning on time. Come December, you'll be fine.
All right. That's a little better, actually. And the reason I'm playing you AI generated music is because I want you to know that in November, just 2 months ago, for the first time ever, there was a song that was completely generated by AI that went to the top of the country music charts, and it freaked people out. All right. People have started not only to produce AI generated music, but they've begun to consume and actually like it. And that poses real questions about the creativity, our humanistic ability to create music against machines. One of the big themes we'll see this semester is the idea of human talent versus the machine. Okay. And that's one of the issues that we will deal with. So my point here is that if you just come to class, do your work, turn it in on time, come May, you'll do fine. Okay. Majority of the students who do that stuff make A's in the class. I'm not out here to destroy anybody's life. This is pretty much an elective for your area 2. I understand it's probably, not anybody is majoring in rock and roll or popular music. That's fine. But you do have to earn your grade. So please plan on being here and being part of the class, engaged and participating. All right. So just want to open the floor a little bit and talk about where we're at in popular music, and then jump back in history as a way of introducing the various ways by which we have consumed popular music and how that determines the role of music in our lives. So who here, let me just say this. Does anybody know the most popular form of music in the United States today? What type of music or what genre is consumed more than any other? Anybody want to take a guess? Go ahead. Somebody just shout something. Pop. Pop? Okay, close. It's actually country music. Country music is the most popular genre. It's been that way for about 2 years, right? It has a lot to do with, what's his name? Morgan, how do you say his last name? Wallen. Morgan Wallen has a lot to do with him. All right. But it also has a lot to do with politics. And that's something that we'll lightly touch upon. Okay. One of the things I want you to understand is in 2017, 8 years ago now, for the first time ever, hip hop music outsold rock and roll and pop. Country became the #1 selling genre in contemporary music in about 2023. That caused a lot of people to talk about the death of rock and roll, or what they meant was guitar-based music, basically. Now, it's interesting because this year has seen the comeback of guitar-based music, largely thanks to one indie band named Geese. Anybody a Geese fan? It's some pretty intense experimental avant-garde music, right? It can be a little hard to take. It's not necessarily easy on the ears, but it has brought back this idea that guitar-based music can compete with both country and hip hop. By the same token, there is a notion that hip hop is in a crisis, that hip hop is not creative as it used to be. In November as well, for the first time since 1991, there was not a single hip hop song in the American top 40. And that freaked people out. Now, part of that reflected how they chose to calculate music sales and airplay and streams. Because in reality, Kendrick Lamar's Luther was still on the charts, but it had been on the charts for so long, they said, we're going to take it off the charts. So there's a little calculation going on there. But if you go and you read about music today, people will talk about the ascendancy of country music. And a lot of that will have political debates surrounding it. The comeback of guitar-based rock, thanks to groups like Geese and Wet Leg and other bands. and then the crisis that hip hop may or may not be in. And part of the reason hip hop is supposed to be in a crisis right now is really a reflection of what happened with SoundCloud about 10 years ago. There was a rise of SoundCloud rap, which was basically homemade rap, lo-fi rap. And the argument was lo-fi rap took the production or the creativity out of hip hop. And so that's why every Drake song kind of sounds like a guy mumbling in your ear, right? Drake doesn't even bother to sing anymore, doesn't feel like. Okay. So these are the types of issues we're going to talk about. Now, I don't really care about popularity. All right. But I am interested in what you individually listen to. So, who would like to tell us what you listen to and why? Anybody? Come on. You got 51 people. Don't be shy. Don't make me call on you. If I point at you and ask you to come up with your favorite artist who you listen to the most these days, somebody give me a hand. All right. You, sir, in the green shirt, what do you listen to?
Kendrick Lamar.
Kendrick Lamar. Why do you listen to Kendrick Lamar?
Produces a lot of good music, but unlike a lot of artists, it has a lot of story behind it.
Has a lot of story behind it. You like narrative. What narratives do you associate with Kendrick Lamar?
Like coming out from nothing to like having a lot and like
Okay.
in like a short time and how it affects someone.
Okay, so you like the success story in Kendrick Lamar. Did you follow the Kendrick and Drake the big diss tracks back and forth?
I kind of was to it late. I was kind of into it late, but I did like after it was all kind of done with.
Yeah. We'll talk about the diss track, about why that came around in rap. And it's a very important function because one of the things that those types of songs do is define who's authentic and not. Basically, Kendrick won that war because he convinced people that he is more authentic when it comes to being black, frankly, than Drake. All right. So I like your point about success stories. He is, and Kendrick doesn't brag a lot, but he's talking about the fact that he came out and he's not really boasting. Boasting is a big part of rap, but he's arguing that he made it, right? He's defined his own identity. Anybody else? Anybody want to admit to being a Swiftie? Okay. What do you think of Life of a Showgirl? Say it again.
I didn't really like it.
Why not?
Because
Don't you feel like a traitor if you're a Swiftie and you don't like Life of a Showgirl? You don't feel like you're betraying the religion or anything? No? Okay. That's a common diss against this album. And it's interesting because some of the same arguments were made about Tortured Poets Society, right? The question for Taylor Swift that she faces is, what does she have left to say that is going to make us relevant? We are in year 20 of Taylor Swift being a huge superstar. That's a way longer lifespan than most artists have had. And the question that these artists face is, how do you stay relevant? How do you stay contemporary? In her case, and we'll talk about this a lot, one of the ways that Taylor Swift has always been so popular is the fact that her story is her biography. In other words, every album is a new chapter of her autobiography. And quite frankly, most of our artists are more interesting when they're down, when something is going on, when they're depressed, when they're upset. If you listen to Life of a Showgirl, and this gets a little silly, but there are songs on there to her boyfriend, right? They're a little explicit. When I listen to popular music, I don't want to hear Taylor Swift singing songs about her boyfriend's junk. I just don't. It's not my cup of tea. All right. So I should mention, one of the things we have to deal with is 90% of popular music is about sex. So we're going to be talking about some topics here that may get a little touchy. We will try to be polite as possible. Every once in a while, you might hear a word, hopefully not from me, that your parents might not appreciate. Let's keep that secret to ourselves. All right. I'm going to trust that we're all adult enough, right? We're not going to play anything too explicit, right? We're not going to play WAP in class, right? All right. Just to reassure you, I like my job too much, right? But we do have to talk about these kinds of issues. All right. So we've got a Swiftie in class who's maybe, you feel like you're growing out of your fandom a little bit? Yeah, kind of. It'll be interesting to see her next album. It'll probably sell gazillions, but it does feel like she's peaked. And that's all right. Every artist peaks at some point. Usually most artists peak within the first couple years. So it is really amazing that she's had this long of a career. All right. Who else? Give me two more examples. Young lady in the red sweater right there. Can you tell me what you listen to the most these days? Say that again. Elvis. You are an Elvis fan? Now listen. How old are you? 18, 19? 18. Elvis has been dead almost 50 years. It is 2026. What are you doing listening to Elvis? Okay. This is one of the ways your generation is different from mine. People, when I was growing up, we didn't want to listen to any garbage that our parents listened to. I'll show you some of the albums my parents collected. Terrible. Hate it. I listened to punk rock because it made me different from my parents. But as rock and roll or popular music gets older, we find those connections between families, ways of connecting through popular music. So it's great that you listen to Elvis because that gives you a tie to your grandfather. It's a way of preserving your memories, right? So that's why you find a lot of young people going with their parents to, say, Bruce Springsteen concerts rather than Taylor Swift, or what we call legacy artists, right? Some of these people from the 60s. The main guy out of the Grateful Dead just died over this weekend, right? That is a devastating news to people who wear tie-dye, smell of patchouli, because that whole experience of community that the Grateful Dead created over 60 years is probably gone now. Now, they may hire a few people to go out and redo those concerts to keep that experience going, but the main guy is not there anymore. All right. All right. One more example. Let me see. Oh, go ahead, sir.
Oh, probably Daniel Caesar.
Say it again.
Daniel Caesar.
Daniel Caesar. Okay, you stumped me on this. Tell me about Daniel Caesar.
He's kind of more like R&B, almost indie in a way.
Okay. So what do you like about R&B, his brand in particular?
He puts like feeling into his music. Like he shows emotion in his songs. Like it's
Okay.
not just him singing, but it's like telling stories.
So you like real feeling in songs. You want a performer that seems to be living the words and putting it out there. Okay. We will talk about the history of R&B and in particular soul music, and that's one of the things. Soul music and R&B is in Black history is an extension of preaching, basically. Okay, so that's a great connection there. We look for in R&B some sort of demonstrative performance of emotions that feel authentic. That's a key word we want to keep in mind: authenticity. That used to be a major gauge by which critics decided what was good and bad music. Problem is, it's a fake standard. There's no such thing as real and unreal. There's only our versions of what we define as real or unreal. All right, the next question. When do you use music? When do you listen to music, and what function does it serve in your life? Anybody? What do you do when you're listening to music? Go ahead.
Usually when I'm listening to music, I'm painting or
You're eating?
yeah.
Okay. So let me ask you this. How many of you have earbuds or headphones that you use? Say everybody here. we use music as sort of the background to our existence. Almost everything we do has music in the background in this day and age. That's a very different experience than when I was growing up. And that's one of the things that I think you need to understand is that when I was your age, you didn't necessarily have the ability to be plugged in to music all the time. So you listen to music while you eat. I listen to music when I exercise, when I go to the gym, right? How many of you listen to music when you go dance? How many of you are dancers? Nobody wants to admit. None of you go, oh, okay. Where do you go dance, by the way? I'm sorry, say that a little louder for me. Okay. Okay. So you're in color guard. Are you guys playing Seven Nation Army by White Stripes by any chance? No, we don't. Okay. That's a great example, by the way, of a song that has earned Jack White millions upon millions of dollars by the fact that he wrote a song that high school bands could do. Because every time you performed that, you made him a royalty. He's made way more money off that one song than any other music he's ever put out. And that's an interesting way in which it gets used. All right. So this is one of the changes of your guys' generation post-COVID. One of the things that COVID did was completely kill, as an entertainment, the idea that we would go to the front porch on a Friday night, or maybe the double branch, and that we would go out dancing, that we would go out with our friends, get in a circle, right, and do the frog, or do the swim, or do the Batman, right? Now, most of us guys are way too self-conscious to dance. Most of us stand around like this and just watch the girls dance, right? But that culture pretty much died in a lot of ways because of COVID. Your generation does not go out and, quite honestly, drink as much as people my age used to. By the way, I will tell you, my department had a Christmas party in December, and we might have had one or two too many, so we ended up going to the front porch. And you would not believe how many students out of this class in the fall freaked out when we walked into the front porch. So if you go there and you see me at the front porch, don't give me this look. All right? But also don't come up to me and go, have you listened to my podcast yet? Because I probably had. All right? So where do you listen to it? The thing I want to emphasize is for us today, most of us listen to music in private situations. Okay, and that's a very different experience. Let's talk about the ways that we consume music. Let's imagine it's 120 years ago. This is what we would use to listen to music. This is the first phonograph. All right. And what it was, it's a little wind-up thing, right? And the recorded sound came on cylinders, almost like wax cylinders, almost like a film strip, if you've ever seen a film strip. So you had to take this little canister, open it up, take out this wax ring, stick it on that thing, put a needle on it, and if you're lucky, right, it might have sounded like this.
I am the Edison phonograph, created by the great wizard of the New World to delight those who would have melody or be amused. I can sing you tender songs of love. I can give you merry tales and joyous laughter. I can transport you to the realms of music. I can call...
So this was like an advertisement that would come with your stereo. You might buy a little console like this and collect these little canisters. And as you can see there, in 1910, you would pay $50 for this. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but in today's money, that's $1,500. How many of you have ever spent $1,500 on music? Okay, what'd you buy?
DAW and a lot of plugins for music.
Okay, so you were creating music?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you bought technology to help you create music. you didn't buy a stereo to listen to music. And we'll talk about why, because we have a very cheap way of all of us listening to music. All right. So these little cylinders were terrible. They'd melt, they'd get scratched up. You really couldn't use them more than a few times. So here's again what the sound might sound like on this one. Now, that may not, get us up off our feet and make us want to dance, partly because of the style of music, that's old kind of big band, but also it's recorded very primitively. We'll talk a lot about recording techniques, because what used to happen all the way up really until the 70s is the way music was recorded was you put people in a room, you arrange them in a certain way, so one microphone at a time. And in the old days, it was one little horn like that could take in the sound. All right. When you make music, you've got all different channels, different tracks to create stuff, and you can balance and mix and do all kinds of things. But part of the primitiveness of recorded music was the fact that you had to record it live with a lot of different people in one room, and you had to find the balance to make it sound good. All right. And that goes on all the way up until the 1970s. That's one of the things I want to emphasize. All right. So, the first thing that comes out after film strips are these types of discs. All right. Much sturdier, much more, they lasted a lot longer, a lot more expensive because they're made out of oil. All right. And so they're kind of pressed together. Now, these are what were called Edison records. And one of the things I would invite you to notice, look how thick that thing is. All right? It's way thicker than most of the records you might have ever seen. These were too expensive for most people. Most people could not afford to create a record collection out of these. So they had to find a cheaper way to produce them. So now this record is broken, but the next version of this was what we call the 78 RPM. This is made out of vinyl, right, which is a synthetic product, okay? Much thinner, much cheaper to make, therefore much more affordable. And so you would buy a Victrola that you'd wind up, and it would play this thing at 78 revolutions per minute, all right? This was the dominant form of recorded music from about 1918 all the way up until 1948 or so. Right? Still, most families did not buy recorded music. And that is in part because of two things that determine how we listen to music. The first of these is what we call portability. The ability to take music with us anywhere we go. When I owned a record player, I had a Victrola, it was probably about this size, probably weighed about 70 pounds. It's not like I could strap it to my back and go jogging, right? So I'm locked in a room listening, usually in a family living room, usually listening with my parents. Okay, that would be the dominant experience. Okay, so one of the things that built the music industry was the idea of creating ways of consuming music that the consumer could take with them wherever they go. Number one place to go was in this newfangled thing called the automobile. How do you take your music with you while you're in the car? Here's a picture of the great boxer Muhammad Ali in the 1960s. When he got rich enough, the first thing he bought was a car that had a record player built into it. You can imagine what that sound was like, especially if you drive the streets of Troy and hit all the potholes, right? You're listening along, all of a sudden, your record's all scratched. But that's what people had in the early 1960s, right? They built a record player into a car, cost about $1,700 in today's money. Very few people could afford it, all right? So portability is one of the main drivers that has caused technology to create and redefine the music experience. The other thing, the other P word that defines it is privacy. The idea that when we want to consume music, we do it by ourselves. And that drives the invention of earphones. There's early sets of earphones, right? The idea that you could put these on by yourself and listen to music and drown out anybody who's trying to talk to you. Now, that came after this sort of experience where everybody could have headphones, but you were all listening to the same stuff. Look how fun that looks. Let's all stand around the record player and listen to the same song. You can't dance, you can't walk, you can't move. You're stuck in place watching a record move around. So what ends up happening over the course of music history is we get headphones, right? That get ever lighter, that get ever easier, to the point now where we have the earbuds, thanks to Bluetooth, that can sit in our ears all day long, right? I can't tell you how many times I go to a faculty meeting where we're supposed to be having a conversation, and I have to say to faculty, just like I have to say to students sometimes, take your earbuds out. You can't hear me if you have earbuds in. Pretty soon, you know what the next evolution will be, is we'll have a chip, a Bluetooth chip planted in our heads that allows us to tune into music like a radio without having any sort of device. So keep in mind, portability, the ability to take music with us, and privacy, the ability to experience music all by ourselves. Those are the two main drivers of technology. What happens in the late 1940s is the invention of two forms of recorded music that become the defining ways we tend to think of, at least for the classic era of rock and roll, as the way people consumed music. One of them was invented for teenagers. This is what we call the 45 RPM. All right. Beginning in late 1940s, early 50s, record companies realized that teenagers had money. They wanted to buy their own music. They could not afford to buy albums, which were $3 or $4 at the time. But you could sell 2 songs on a cheap thing of plastic, a front side and a back side, for about 50 cents. So you would go to the department store, the equivalent of Walmart or Target, and they would have a little section for teenagers. And this is how most teenagers who came of age in the 50s, 60s, and 70s experienced music. It was because of the 45 RPM, we have the invention of the singles chart, the Hot 100. Who cares what the most popular song in the country is? Well, the music industry did, because this is how they sold it, how they measured the value of this music. How many of these were teenagers buying? Okay, so this becomes the dominant form for teenagers. However, adults are buying what we call 33 and a thirds. All right, vinyl albums, still fairly affordable. Usually get them for $3 or $4. Most of the early 33 and a thirds in the early 50s were jazz records aimed at adults. If you were a teenager, you might get a Beatles album. This is the first album by the Beatles, 1963, right? And they might put it together, but there might be 4 good songs on here and a bunch of other stuff that they used what's called filler to kind of fill up 20 sides of each side of the record. Okay? It was a way of collecting, being a completist in a sense, collecting everything that an artist put out. But still, the best stuff you were going to buy on this. And you could take this to a party, put it on a record player, put a stack of them on there, and that was your DJ, right? You didn't have to change the record all the time. One of the main things we'll discover as we go through the history of especially rock and roll is that the 33 and the third became the dominant form of music art because you had 40 minutes. So by the mid 60s, really on up until the early 90s, people would produce albums that are supposedly the equivalent of like a novel. You could tell a story over 12 songs. So here's one of the most famous albums ever released, 48 years old, Fleetwood Mac's Rumors. Anybody Fleetwood Mac fans? Okay. This is one of the best-selling albums ever released. The vinyl version of this album, as recently as 2 years ago, was the number 5 best-selling vinyl record, 45 years after it was released. Why is that? Because the songs and the sequence of the songs tell a story that people identify with. The whole thing about Fleetwood Mac is you had two couples who were together, who had a breakup over the making of this music. So you go from every song, I hate you, no, I hate you, no, I really hate you, no, I hate you more. And it's very compelling music, right? So this becomes one of the best-selling records ever. We'll do a day on Fleetwood Mac because the popularity of this music is pretty amazing over 50 years. But all of a sudden you get an album that is not only has a big picture that is artwork, right? That the art is central to the experience of listening to it, but you might get a poster that comes with the album that you could put up in your college dorm room. But you also get the lyrics. And this changes the experience too, because all of a sudden you're not just listening to music, but what you're doing is you're reading along. You're not just hearing Stevie Nicks sing, you're listening to her say, now here you go again, you say you want your freedom. Well, who am I to keep you down? It's only right that you should play the way you feel it, right? And then you get to the great chorus, thunder only happens when it's raining, which is not true. Players only love you when they're playing, right? So the words become as important as the music. We even get to the point later in that same decade in which you get albums that are basically souvenirs. This is my parents' album of Jesus Christ Superstar, which is probably the most famous rock musical ever. A little blasphemous, I'll be honest. But it's interesting stuff. And this is 1970. It came with what we call the gatefold. Again, it's like an object you could display in your house, right? It comes with a theater program, so you get the lyrics and you get all the notes about production, right? So you're not just taking the record out of the packaging, right? The packaging is part of the experience. And that's why rock and roll gains sort of so much cultural credence. The album becomes a dominant form of art. It's like a canvas, right, that tells a story. It's like a painting or a movie script. We even get to the point where we get these things. This is another one of my parents' collection falling apart. This is what we call the box set. Now, this was a cheapo collection that people would buy in the 70s, where you could get all the big artists of the day. Elton John is actually on here, believe it or not. Olivia Newton-John as well. But you could get the top hits of the day on record all at once, a compilation. We didn't have playlists back then that we could get onto Spotify and get, so we had to buy these. But the more that rock and roll becomes sort of ingrained art, then we get what are kind of called collector's box sets. This is one of the earliest and most famous. This one is 40 years old now. I bought this when I was 20 years old, right? It is all of the best stuff that you need up to that point to know the story of this particular artist. And again, it's like a museum piece. It's like a collector's item. It comes with a whole book, right? Comes with what we call liner notes. I even have a poster in here from a Beatles album called the White Album, right? That you came with the record. And you, again, put it up in your dorm room. I don't know why, it's not that great of a poster, but that's what people would use to collect with these albums. Now, again, vinyl albums are not portable. You have to have a record player that spins. So people are still trying to find ways of getting music into cars, into machines that let us walk around. The worst form of music ever made to be portable, and these are kind of a joke, came out in the 60s and the 70s. These are what are called 8-track tapes. Anybody ever seen one of these? Used to be, this was how you saw that the culture of the 70s was cheesy, because 8-track tapes, the sound quality was terrible. They had 4 tracks on them, and what would happen is you put it in the player, and about 2 minutes in to the first song, it would have to click the track. So it would fade out, then it would fade up. But it was the only way at the time that people could enjoy recorded music in the car. So they had to invent a new form of music that would allow you to install technology into your car that allowed you to listen to it while you were driving. That's how this came about. Anybody know what these are called? Anybody know what these are called? Let me show you a little TikTok, one of my favorite TikToks ever. This is what's called a cassette. All right. And part of the reason cassettes became for sale only as recently as 1979. That's only 46 years ago. It may seem like a long time to you guys. It doesn't seem like a long time to me because I was 13 years old at the time and I remember when they came out. So you would go buy the cassette so you could listen to it in the car. But the other thing they sold was blank cassettes, which freaked the music industry out because all of a sudden, if I didn't want to buy a $6 cassette, I could buy a $2 blank one and have my friend record it for me. This was what was called piracy, supposedly. Now, one of my great all-time punk rock bands, the Dead Kennedys, kind of an objectionable name, all right? But they're a great band. They put out an album one time where they put all the music on the first side of the cassette. And on the second side, the label said, as you see here, home taping is killing the record industry. We left this side blank so you can help kill it. The idea was the record companies were ripping you off, and therefore you as a consumer had a right to take a blank cassette and make your own music. Cassettes are a source of great nostalgia for those of us who grew up in the 80s, because what we would do is we would make our own cassettes of recorded music. Here's my favorite TikTok. This is a girl discovering a cassette player.
To be sure, so I asked one of the employees what it was for, and she said tape, and I said, what kind of tape goes in a radio? And she said, a tape with music. And I said, okay. And she said it was called a cassette tape, and I don't know why I'm saying that. I think probably after the person who invented it.
Cassette tapes?
All right, so you get the joke here. I'm sure she knows how to pronounce cassette, but she says, oh, it's a cassette, right? That's supposed to dramatize how foreign some of the music listening experience is to you guys, as opposed to myself who grew up with these. Okay, so the cassette comes around, and not only all of a sudden can it fit into a car, but you can record on it. This is what an early one in the 70s looks like. Not exactly portable. But then in 1981, we got this, a Sony Walkman, a cassette player that you could put on your belt, have headphones, and walk around with. This was the invention, the experience that we have today of being totally immersed in our own music. This was the big invention of portability, the Sony Walkman. I will tell you that I'm old enough to remember the first time I ever saw a Sony Walkman. Saw a guy at a party wearing it. He wasn't talking to anybody at this party because he had headphones and he was listening to his own music. I said, I got to get me one of those. I asked my parents, I was 15 years old, will you get me a Walkman for Christmas? My parents were like, oh, I don't know about this. This could be dangerous because you could be wearing headphones and walking around and not be paying attention. You might be listening to Judas Priest, step out into traffic and get hit by a car. That's actually what my parents said to me when I asked for a Sony Walkman. They eventually got me one, and all of a sudden, I don't have to listen to anybody else in the world. I can put this on at home, in my room. I can put it on outside. I can put it when I ride a bike. And I am in my own world. And it's an experience that, again, you guys are so used to, but it was brand new for us. All right? The problem with the cassette, and again, it's a great source of nostalgia for people my age, because it created the opportunity for us to make homemade tapes. These are examples of what we call mixtapes. All right? So, mixtapes. Guys, I'm going to give you a little romantic advice. This was how you landed a chick in the 1980s. All right? If I've got a girl that I got the hots for, hypothetically, I'm just going to pretend it's you. I don't mean to embarrass you. Right? If you and I are in class together, what's your name, man? Caleb. I got the hots for Caleb. How do I win her over? I could write a note. That probably wouldn't work. Roses are red, violets blue, you ain't gonna fall. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna make you a present of all the music that is meaningful to me, so you can have a little piece of my heart and get to know me. It was the making of the mixtape, and it was generally boys who made these for girls. That's sort of the gender dynamic we live in, right? So I would give you all of this meaningful music, and that was supposed to win you over. Now, did it work? 90% of the time, Taylor would listen to my music and go, I hate that garbage. Right? But it was the gesture of recording you, different artists that I love, as a way of supposedly introducing you, not only to me, but to what is great music. Okay, so the mixtape was a hugely important thing for those of us that grew up in the 80s, because it was part of courting. All right. Problem with cassettes, again, is the technology, the sound's not very good. Tapes break, you got to tape them back together. Sometimes they get caught up in the machines. You got to try to wind them back up. The average life of a cassette was maybe a year or two, right? It didn't stand repeated plays. So that's why we ended up getting the invention of these. These are what are called compact discs. How many of you own any compact discs? Anybody? All right, a few people. Let me tell you, beginning in the mid 1980s, I didn't own a compact disc until 1990. Partly because they were too expensive. They were about $16, $17 a piece. Here's a fun fact that it definitely distinguishes my generation from yours. How much money a month would you say you spend on music? I'm going to guess that most of you, we're going to pretend you're not on your parents' Spotify account, right? But most of you, if you have a Spotify account, pay what, $12, $13 a month? Anybody get it cheaper? More expensive?
Student plan's cheaper.
What's that?
Student plan's cheaper.
How much is the student plan?
I think it's $6 a month.
How much?
$6 a month. And you get Hulu.
Say that again.
I think it's $6 a month.
$6 a month. You can, for $6 a month, get any song in the universe that you want. right? My generation that got suckered into buying CDs, we sometimes spent as much as 70 to 80 to $100 a month collecting these. I've got a whole house full of these. I don't have any use for them. I got a CD player, never play it. Why not? I don't need to, right? It's not portable. This was where people started to feel ripped off by music companies because they would charge so much for CDs under the idea that the sound was better. What it really meant was it took a lot to scratch a CD, right? They were a lot more portable because you could put them in car CD players, right? But you didn't get the album experience. Look at the difference in packaging. You went from about 150, right, centimeters square to about 40. And look at how the packaging. If I want to read the lyrics, this is why I have to wear. That's why I have to wear readers at my age. I blew out my eyes trying to read these little cards. Right? So it shrunk the experience, made it more expensive. That's why in the late 1990s, when music began to be computerized and we all got home computers with MP3s, that we began to switch to these devices. MP3 player. What's the most famous MP3 player? Anybody know? Anybody? Go ahead. iPod, exactly. Before we get there, let me show you one more piece of equipment because this is culturally very important. This is, now, sometimes with certain genres, we have technology that is bigger and louder because that's part of the culture. So this is what we had in the 80s called a jam box, all right, boom box. This was largely associated with rap music. There's this kind of quasi-racist term, unfortunately, associated with it that you sometimes hear, called a ghetto blaster. All right, we got very quickly in the 70s told, do not use the term ghetto blaster because that implies something. But there's LL Cool J. That's how, as a rap culture, you first experienced music, loud. You had this big boom box that you put out there, largely playing beats that you could rap to. So there's the Beastie Boys. That became almost a fashion accessory. If you've ever seen the music Say Anything or the movie, there's a big romantic moment where the hero holds a boombox above his head and plays a song to win over the girl. Probably wouldn't work with Kayla either, right? She's a little too picky, I'm going to guess, right? But the boombox was part of that experience as well. So sometimes we do go for big, impractical things, right? But by and large, the next step of the invention was the Sony Walkman, where you could play CDs, where you could walk around. Okay. Then we get to the iPod, invented by Steve Jobs of Apple. All right. Here's one of the great all-time marketing reveals. Anybody a marketing person here? We'll wrap up in just a sec, I promise. This is one of the great all-time marketing reveals. And look at how he emphasizes portability.
Today, we're going to focus on the iPod mini. Now, the iPod mini is what all of our competitors have their sights focused on. Why? Well, it's obvious. Because the iPod mini is the most popular MP3 player in the world. It's the most popular iPod, and that makes it the most popular MP3 player in the world. So that's the one everybody's focused on. Well, today, we're going to do something pretty bold. Today, we're going to replace it. We're going to replace it with something new. Now, let's go back to the beginning, because we started this all with 1,000 songs in your pocket, right? We started it with the original iPod. And then we carried 1,000 songs in your pocket over to the iPod mini. Well, now we're going to replace the iPod mini with a new player, an entirely new ground-up design that also has 1,000 songs in your pocket. And it's called the iPod Nano. 1,000 songs in your pocket, the iPod Nano. So, let's get a camera.
This is a great Great.
I've got a
Thank you.
pocket right here. Now this pocket's been the one that your iPod's gone in, traditionally. The iPod and the iPod mini fit great in there. You ever wonder what this pocket's for? I've always wondered that. Well, now we know, because this is the new iPod mini.
All right, so you see the idea is we shrink the technology, but we can include more. Now, remember the iPod, whole idea was you transfer your MP3s from your compact disc through your computer onto this MP3 player. That's why they call it 1,000 songs in your pocket. Shrink it, shrink it, shrink it. All of a sudden you've got something that's like a matchbox that can fit in that super irrelevant pocket that we all have. I guess it's supposedly for a key, but none of us ever use it, right? I mean, we used it in my day. We used to hide our weed in there, but that was, they knew where to look. But the idea here is that all of a sudden, the iPod was really only popular for about 6 years. It's an amazing invention, but it was irrelevant within 6 years. Because what happened? Apple invented this device, right? Not just a phone, but a computer phone. Okay? And what happened with this? All of a sudden, companies said, you don't have to download the songs onto your phone. You don't have to carry 1,000 songs. We'll give you a platform that you can plug into where you basically rent the songs for a certain amount a month. All right? So that's how we get to Spotify. That's how we get to this idea that music is accessible at any second we want it. Right? There's the iPod. You download it. But it also makes us slaves to Spotify. Now, how many of you have Verizon? What happened yesterday with Verizon? Verizon was out all afternoon. People were freaking out. Oh my God, my phone's not working. I actually went to the Verizon store because I was supposed to have a phone conference. And it pulled up and the guy said, you're about the 10,000th person. It's not you. It'll be back up. But it messed up my life because I'm so dependent to be able to have access to the internet, to everything this phone can do, including music. Last night when I got home from work, I couldn't play any music because I didn't have Verizon. All right. So this is the thing I want you guys to understand. You live in a world where music is accessible at any moment in time. All you need is your phone and a connection. The question we have to ask ourselves, and this is what your baby boomer parents would say, you don't value your music as much as we did because you don't collect these products, these documents. You don't have the albums in your hand. You don't have the CDs in your hand. You can rent a song and listen to it, but you don't own it. It kind of floats through your life rather than being a part of it. That's something that I would challenge us to question. But we also have to ask how Spotify has changed the experience of music. If music is everywhere, is it really anywhere all at once? The other thing with Spotify, they don't pay the music. They don't pay the people who make the music. Taylor Swift gets 1/10 of 1 penny every time I stream her song. Now, in her case, she can still make $10 or $20 million because everybody streams it. But Spotify does not pay artists. And what that means is if you're a musician, you're not going to make your living producing your art. You're not going to make it by releasing albums. How do you make a living? Playing live, or the worst thing that I think people get condemned to, selling merch. Most musicians today make the bulk of their income either playing live or hawking t-shirts, believe it or not. That's how the music business has changed. Good or bad? I don't know. It's just different. So those are kinds of things that we'll talk about. So again, just to wrap up, the two things I want you to keep in your mind. Portability, the ability we have to take music with us anywhere we go, and privacy, the experience of listening to music alone. How many of you have been in a car ride with somebody where you would really rather just have had your own music in your ears rather than having to listen to somebody else's? Music is a different experience now because we don't want to share it as much as it used to be shared. All right? Okay. We'll come to class on Tuesday. We'll start out at the end of the 40s with the evolution of rock and roll, how it was rhythm and blues, country music. If you have any questions, please email me. We'll start the first quiz a week from Thursday. All right? After ad drop. Good to meet y'all. We'll see you next Tuesday.